What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Let's start off with the gun control push, because there's a lot of things happening with that. And again, we have seen this before. Every time there's one of these staged shootings followed by demands that we ban all guns because of the crazy act of one or two individuals who may have been out of their heads on prescription psychiatric medication, membership in the NRA goes up, gun buying goes up, and it is really amazing this time. The NRA was attacked. Some of their supporters, their corporate links were severed under pressure from the left. It all backfired. They've gained 500,000 new members. That's a lot of members. It's shattered all previous membership records. Everybody understands what's going on. This isn't about safety. This is about dictatorship versus freedom. Now, Switzerland has a very high rate of gun ownership, but it doesn't have mass shootings. And Business Insider took a look and found out that basically they start the gun culture with the children, which is exactly the system that I was raised with. And they every year they have a shooting contest for kids aged 13 to 17. For boys and teenage girls. Girls have been allowed to compete since 1991. And they're basically using Swiss Army service rifles. And they're taught how to shoot, and they're taught how to do gun safety. And there are no restrictions on any of this stuff. And they don't have the mass shootings. They also don't have the problem with the prescription psychiatric medication. Now, there's a video, we just put it up at whatreallyhappened.com, and you might want to take a look at it because I imagine it's going to vanish in the bit bucket of YouTube very soon. But this has to do with Nick Freitas, and he is basically a delegate member in the Virginia House of Delegates. He's running for the Senate up against Tim Payne. And he just did this amazing video, runs about 7 minutes, just totally demolishing the left on gun control. And the points that he made were legitimate. Every time more gun restrictions are placed on the public, crime goes up. So the Democrats are out there saying, give us your guns, you will have a much safer life. And they can't deliver on that promise. Nobody's ever delivered on that promise. And Nick talks about all these cities in the United States like Chicago and Washington, D.C. that have very strict gun laws and also happen to have the highest rates of gun violence. At no time in history has a gun ban resulted in a lower crime rate. Encouraging gun ownership lowers crime rate. Kennesaw, Georgia. Some years ago, they passed a city ordinance. Every house had to have a gun. And crime dropped by 80%. And then Nick goes on to basically talk about the tactics used by the Democrats. And Nick is saying, let's have a fair and honest debate on gun safety, school safety, and the Second Amendment, but let's base it on facts. But because the facts are working against the gun grabbers, the Democrats are accusing anybody defending the Second Amendment of being Nazis and segregationists. And Nick put them in their place by reminding them that it was the Democratic Party that supported the KKK and segregation. Now, a lot of other people are coming on out and saying there is a value to allowing law-abiding citizens to have guns. Condoleezza Rice on The View was out there saying that her father used guns to repel the Ku Klux Klan from their home. And there's a perfect example, especially as Antifa starts to go violent across the country. And again, the gun grabbers are out there saying, don't worry, the police will protect you. Yeah, they did a really bang-up job of that, so to speak, down in Florida, didn't they? Now, up in Oregon, there's a young man, he's 20 years old, and he's filed a lawsuit against Dick's and Walmart for discrimination because the stores have, on their own regard, restricted gun sales to those over 21. There was no law passed. They just did it on their own, and now they're up for an age discrimination lawsuit. Now, normally age discrimination lawsuits are something that you see with the elderly, but this is legitimate. This kid is experiencing age discrimination from Dick's and Walmart's. And he's doing the right thing about it. He's going to court on this thing. Meanwhile, of course, the gun grabbers are out there saying that Russia is behind the gun rights movement. It's all a Russian plot to make sure we all have guns so that we just kill each other off. I'm not kidding. That's what they actually said. Forgetting that when the population is armed, the occurrence of crime and violence actually goes down. But these days, anything that doesn't go your way, oh, it's Russia's fault. Got to be Russia's fault here. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Hawaii's own Representative Tulsi Gabbard, I really like her. I agree with about 80% of the things that she's saying. And she's introduced a bill called Securing America's Elections Act to ensure the integrity of this November's elections. Yeah, it's really necessary. And she's out there saying it's kind of strange because you've got all these members of Congress who are out there screaming that Russia is interfering with our elections, but Tulsi's not getting a lot of support on this bill. And basically, the obvious conclusion is both parties are themselves hacking elections, and they don't want to surrender that ability because then they have to rely on the people's vote, and they don't want to do that. Now, Judicial Watch has filed 2 lawsuits for the OHR Fusion GPS documents. Tom Fitton is out there saying the Justice Department needs to come clean about this scandal because, once again, the Justice Department is apparently covering up misconduct targeting President Trump. Now, Bruce Orr, a top justice official in the Obama administration, had an obvious conflict of interest to his wife Nellie's work with the Clinton DNC vendor Fusion GPS on the anti-Trump dossier. A lot of conflicts of interest out there. Now, it turns out that one of the Mueller witnesses is an former Australian Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, has a link to the Clinton Foundation. He's another one of the insiders, the Clinton insiders. And apparently, this was the source of the tip in 2016 that prompted the whole Russia-Trump investigation. So it all tracks back to this guy. This guy did the whisper campaign and said, I think Trump is working for Russia. Before that, he'd arranged one of the largest foreign donations to Bill and Hillary Clinton's charitable foundation, which actually didn't do that much charity. It was basically $25 million in aid from Australia. And a lot of people in the U.S. were saying, why is that going on? And as a matter of fact, the people of Australia were saying, why are you sending our tax dollars to the Clinton Foundation? But something was going on there. This guy's another one of these deep state narcocracy shills, if you will. Now, what's interesting is you look at Jeff Sessions, and everybody's saying, do something, do something, do something. And 4 months ago, Sessions said he needed a factual basis in order to appoint a second special counsel. He didn't need a factual basis for the Robert Mueller investigation. That was based entirely on the dossier, which was unsubstantiated at the time and is now known to have been a work of fiction. So if there's no dossier, there's no Mueller investigation. And again, the double standard is just staggering. There's plenty of factual information. Even the FBI admitted Hillary Clinton committed felony violations of Title 18. That's enough factual information for a further investigation and indictments. Now, Jason Chaffetz wants the Fast and Furious investigation to be reopened. That's the one where the same U.S. government that is telling you you cannot have sporting rifles was sending assault weapons down to Mexican drug gangs. And, of course, the Department of Justice and Attorney General Jeff Sessions are refusing. No, there will not be another investigation into Fast and Furious. Now, getting onto the case of Sam Nunberg, basically, as you know, yesterday he was out there saying he was not going to respond to a subpoena from Robert Mueller. He was going to tear it up. And apparently overnight he had a change of heart, or he got a phone call, because today he's saying that yes, he will cooperate. So that was a bit of a flash in the pan. Interesting little article over at Rolling Stone, another one by Matt Taibbi, and it's called The New Blacklist. And basically he's talking about the return of McCarthyism, where anybody who doesn't agree with what the U.S. government is doing or what the corporate media is saying is automatically presumed to be some kind of a Russian agent. If you're a supporter of Donald Trump, you're presumed to be a Russia collaborator. It's a smear job. And Trump was supported by plain, ordinary, everyday Americans. They're not Russian agents, but not according to CNN. If you're a Trump supporter, you're a Russian agent. And I think what they're trying to do is use shunning, if you will, to try and get people to stop voting GOP this November. Oh, if you vote for the Republicans, if you support Trump, you must be a Russian agent. We're going to round you all up and put you in camps like we did to the Japanese in World War II. Now, MSNBC has just gone completely overboard with Russiagate. And their coverage of Russiagate outweighs its coverage of other issues, like the U.S.-backed humanitarian disaster in Yemen, and the network's refusal to correct the disparity could lead to dangerous conclusions. And the group Fairness and Accuracy in Media basically studied MSNBC and said overwhelmingly MSNBC is pushing the Russia propaganda, the Russia bashing. MSNBC ran nearly 5,000% more segments that mentioned Russia than segments that mentioned Yemen. That's why we call them prostitutes and correspondents. Now, there is a book in PDF form that we have linked to the front page of What Really Happened, and the title is From Russia with Money, kind of a play on the James Bond movie. Here is where it's going. Now, we've talked before about the Chinagate scandal. Back in 1996, Bill Clinton was running for re-election, and using his authority as president, he authorized the transfer of militarily sensitive technology to China, while Chinese money was pouring into his re-election campaign through some Chinese American citizens to make it all look legal. And there was briefly an investigation. It was called Chinagate. And it came to an end because apparently the White House email server suffered a catastrophic failure and there had been no backup tapes. We've heard that one before. Well, this book is making the case that Hillary Clinton did exactly the same thing all over again. At the same time they were getting ready to do this Uranium One deal as part of the Russian reset, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, authorized the transfer of sensitive military technology to Russia, and the Russian money poured into the Clinton Foundation. And the FBI investigated this, the U.S. Army investigated this. They were saying all kinds of technology was being sent over there that represented a threat to our nation. And of course, nothing was done about it. But I have to wonder, is this how Putin got all his new wonder weapons built so fast? Because the U.S. was working on hypersonic technology. And so if you have this group of scientists working on hypersonic technology and this group of scientists working on hypersonic technology, and you steal what these scientists have done and you merge it with what these scientists have done, obviously they have a huge advantage. They've got twice as much data and information to work with. So, of course, they're going to get to the finish line quicker. So, download this PDF and save it, because this is a major, major scandal. This is even worse than Uranium One. This is betrayal of our country. And finally, getting on back to Hillary's email server, which, by the way, still to this date has not had a forensic analysis done on it. Nobody's looked at it. Apparently, FBI agent Peter Strzok was informed that Hillary Clinton's private email server had been broken into, based on the metadata on there, and he didn't follow up. Nothing was done. Hands off. Now remember, Guccifer, the hacker was inside Hillary's email server, said he saw at least 10 other foreign IPs logged into the system going through the files. So was Hillary operating an espionage operation while Secretary of State? Was Peter Strzok told to stand down and don't interfere with it? Now, getting on back to Vladimir Putin's State of the Union speech, the warmongers, of course, have seized on that last part about the new wonder weapons to say, see, Russia's being aggressive. Russia's planning to kill us all. We need more money for our military to counter his new wonder weapons. Mr. Putin's message was actually, nuclear war remains unthinkable. Please stop thinking about it. That was what his message was all about. But Putin made his speech, and the U.S. is now well on its way to a Soviet-style bankruptcy in response. Now, one of the things that helped bring down the Soviet Union is the Soviet Union, in response to Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, bankrupted itself, trying to catch up. And they needn't have done that because SDI cost the U.S. huge amounts of money. In fact, that was the period when the U.S. went from being the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation. And they didn't really come up with anything of real useful value. But if Putin is bluffing about his new weapons, he is replaying Reagan's strategy back at us and counting on the greed of the military-industrial complex to make it work. And so far, it seems to be working because all the military people are out there saying, oh, we must have more money. We absolutely must have more money. And the U.S. already outspends every other country. The U.S. spends more on the weaponry of war and the machinery of death than the next 26 nations combined, 25 of whom are supposed to be our friends. Now, interesting story from Russia Insider. Apparently, Moscow Stadium, huge crowd showed up for an opportunity to sing the Russian anthem with Vladimir Putin. He's very popular there. It looks like, barring massive election fraud, that he's going to win his next election. But the Western media is out there already trying to undermine this by saying that they were all ordered to be there, that 130,000 people, Putin ordered them to be there. It's like when North Korea sent those cheerleaders down to the Olympics, and every media story about the cheerleaders always had something in there, they're vulnerable to rape. They're told one mistake and they'll go to jail. And just all this other nonsense, trying to undermine the beauty of the moment. And they were very lovely young ladies, and they were very, very good at what they do. That's the job of the media, to demonize the enemies, to tell you who your enemies are. But we're all big boys and we're all big girls, and we can decide for ourselves who our enemies are. And they appear to be much closer to home than North Korea or Russia or Iran. Now, the White House is once again considering a military escalation against Syria based on the claim of gas exposure in eastern Ghouta. They've done this one before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Or, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Seems to be the motto of the U.S. government and the corporate media. But the United States does not want to give up on Syria. They don't want to have another defeat, no matter how much it costs in other people's money or children. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, if you would like to support Republic Broadcasting Network, the postal address to send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Or if you want to pledge to be a recurring subscriber, the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And folks, we really do need the money. If you're not able to help us out, we're going to have to start selling the control room technicians for medical experiments. Now, getting back on over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural, the militants are retreating under the Syrian army pressure in eastern Ghouta. The Syrian army is winning with Russia's help, and that's why the U.S. is looking for any excuse where they can go back on in and start attacking Syria's army, because they're using gas on people. They have nuclear weapons. They have a Death Star. So we've been at war in Syria for 7 years. That's a very long time to be at war. Not as long, of course, as Afghanistan. But all of these cities in Syria are under siege by these terrorist groups supported by Western powers. Now, the media is out there trying to say, oh, no, this is all the fault of Assad and Syria, and it's all the fault of Russia. But we know they're lying. It's always the safe assumption. Given how much we've been lied to already, it is wise and prudent to assume anything coming out of a politician's mouth or a corporate media talking head is sheer, utter nonsense. You can't rely on anything out of corporate media except the sports scores and the weather, and they're not all that good on the weather. That's why you have to become your own researcher, your own analyst. You got to think for yourself, people. That's what the government is really afraid of, that you're going to think for yourself instead of just believing as you're told to believe. Now, there's an article out of Russia Today, what the mainstream media isn't telling you about Eastern Ghouta. And it's basically pointing out how the corporate media is still trying to say that the people causing all the violence are these moderate rebels. They're freedom fighters. And this is all the fault of Bashar al-Assad. And they're just massacring civilians out of villainous bloodlust. No, it's a little more complex than that. The terrorists are refusing to allow the civilians to leave because they want more civilians dead, because they know the media will blame it on Syria and Russia. Now, the U.S. has come under criticism because, as you know, there was this humanitarian pause every day that's been set up by Russia. And Russia is now saying that Washington, D.C. is basically flouting this UN resolution on Syria. It is preventing the militants it controls from launching daily raids on the Syrian army troops in eastern Ghouta and shelling the capital of Damascus. The U.S. isn't playing by the rules. Now, I'm sure the U.S. is going to say, we don't really have that much control over the militants. Yeah, you do. Stop sending them weapons. Stop sending them food. Stop paying them. Most of them are mercenaries anyway. You stop sending those checks, peace will break out. Now, down on the border with Turkey, Turkish pressure is now so great against Syria, the Kurds have halted their operations against ISIS in order to turn and basically fight the Turks. The Kurds may be Kurds, but they're also Syrians, and they're seeing this incursion as an invasion of their country. So that is starting to escalate, and it's going to escalate even more because Erdogan is calling for mobilization of army reserves in Syria. He's out there making speeches saying, we need to bring our reserves up. And basically, he's saying Turkish men who have already served in the army need to be ready to go to Syria. Now, Turkish men are subject to conscription when they reach the age of 20, and they are required to mobilize until the age of 41. So we're talking full-on war about to break out here. Now, a Russian military plane has crashed in Syria, killing 26 passengers and 6 crew members. The plane came down just 1,600 feet short of the runway at Khmeimim Air Base near the city of Latakia. And the initial indications, it was a mechanical malfunction. The aircraft was not taking fire at the time. But still, it's a tragedy anyway. Now, over in Iraq, interestingly enough, Press TV is saying Iraq and the U.S. may be heading to a clash over the American military presence because, as you know, Iraq's parliament has approved a bill to demand a timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the country. And MPs have assigned Prime Minister Hadi al-Abadi, by virtue of the same bill, to take an appropriate measure in the same direction. Now, Ron Paul is out there saying after 15 years, maybe we should listen to the Iraqi parliament. Not going to happen. And after we come back from this commercial break, I will explain exactly why. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the situation in Iraq, where Iraq's parliament has approved a bill to demand a timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the country. And members of parliament have assigned Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, based on that bill, to take the appropriate measures in the same direction. In other words, find out when the Americans are leaving. Here's where it gets interesting. The head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, is saying the NATO troops are staying in Iraq, which includes the U.S. forces, because that same Iraq Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has sent NATO a written request saying, we need you to stay in the country. That's what NATO was claiming. Well, they didn't come up with this letter anytime until just now. It was a big hush-hush secret, apparently. But apparently, Abadi did not bother mentioning it to the Parliament or the people of Iraq, or the letters of forgery. And we know that forged documents form a major part of U.S. foreign policy. Remember the Iraqi yellow cake document? That turned out to be a forgery. Now, Netanyahu has basically issued a statement about his meeting with Donald Trump, basically saying that it was all about Iran. Iran, 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 Iran. They said they discussed the Palestinians for maybe 15 minutes. Now, there's a story over on Mondo Weiss, and it's basically quoting Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson saying Israel is trying to suck America into an Iranian war that could lead to a world war. Now, remember back when we were getting ready to go into Iraq, Israel was out there as a cheerleader, and Bibi was out there with his pom-poms and his short skirt saying, yes, go America, stomp on Iraq. Blood makes the grass grow. Blood makes the grass grow. And now they're doing it again. They don't want to pay for the war, but that's what the U.S. taxpayers for. And they don't want to risk their precious children in war. That's what America's children are for. So once again, Iran is cheerleading for the United States to attack another nation in the Middle East. Now, Iran, well aware that Israel is arm-twisting the U.S. to launch a war, well aware that Donald Trump is fully on board with that plan and is thinking about unilaterally pulling out of the P5+1 deal, Iran has very gently reminded everybody they can resume enriching weapons-grade uranium in less than 48 hours. Now, under the JC 432 pounds of medium-enriched uranium they possessed, and that was about 20% enrichment, and they gave up all but 600 pounds of the 15,000 pounds of low-enriched uranium they had. But they've still got the machinery. It's all still there. And I'm sure that Iran was hedging their bets by keeping it maintained. If Trump pulls out of the P5+1 deal and Israel goes on schly, that's the only way they're going to save themselves from being invaded. Now, according to a report from Palestinian aid groups, Israeli crop-dusting planes, who were not invited, are flying over Gaza's farmlands and spraying the crops with toxic chemicals, which, of course, is causing heavy losses to Palestinian farmers. They don't have a crop to sell. It's causing increase in the hunger. All of this is illegal under international law. Now, as you know, AIPAC is having their big conference here in Washington, in which everybody gets up there and pledges, you know, Israel, Israel, über alles. And AIPAC is now expressing concern that progressive Democrats are kind of abandoning Israel. They don't want to be involved anymore. They're not fanatical supporters of Israel. Maybe we're just all tired of hearing Israel whine all the time. Maybe we're all suffering Israel burnout. You ever think about that? Now, over at the foreword, they have an article that it is well past time for AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, because that's what they are. They are an agent for the nation of Israel. And you want to talk about interference in our internal domestic politics, look at AIPAC. Huge amounts of money going to candidates who promise to be loyal to Israel. Huge amounts of money going to the opponents of candidates who question Israel. They have tremendous influence with the corporate media. Everybody wants to scream that Russia's meddling in our system. They don't have any evidence about it. But you look around and you see the obvious evidence of Israeli meddling in our system, in our media, in our politics, in our elections. Why is that not considered a bad thing? Now, as you know, Al Jazeera has produced 2 recent documentaries. The first one was on the Israel lobby in Great Britain, and it caused a huge upset when it came on out. It turns out the second one is on the Israel lobby here in the United States of America, and already they're trying to put diplomatic pressure on Qatar so that this documentary never gets out. They don't want you to see it. They don't want you to see it. But one of the things that is in it is it isn't just AIPAC that should register as a foreign agent. Apparently, there are a whole bunch of organizations like the neoconservative think tank Foundation for Defense of Democracies. It's functioning as an agent of the Israeli government. Now, according to a source who's seen the documentary, it contains footage of a powerful Israeli official claiming, "We have FDD, we have others working on this." And FDD is not registered as a foreign agent. I hope that documentary gets leaked out onto the net. If it's shown in theaters, I will buy a ticket and see it. If it's on pay-per-view, I'll pay the money to see it. If it gets blocked and banned, it must be leaked onto the internet. That's what we had to do with Conspiracy of Silence, documentary about the pedophile scandal, the Franklin scandal. Pressure was put on the TV networks to basically bury it. And the VHS copies were all bought up en masse and destroyed. But an editing tape surfaced. Now, Lindsey Graham is out there saying that the Israeli government is requesting ammunition from the U.S. as well as U.S. diplomatic support for when Israel starts striking civilian targets in Lebanon. They want to attack apartment buildings, hospitals, and schools. And their excuse is Hezbollah is hiding in those buildings. Now, the U.S. Navy is boosting its Mediterranean presence, and apparently this has nothing to do with Russia or Syria or anything else. Exxon is getting ready to explore for oil offshore of Cyprus. And as you know, there's a little bit of tension between Cyprus and Turkey. And they're working in an area where Turkey blocked an Eni drilling ship from prospecting in February. So the U.S. is coming in to basically protect Cyprus oil drillers. Now, over in Korea, things are getting very, very interesting. And obviously, the 2 delegations and Kim Jong-un met and started talking and started sending signals to Washington, D.C. They're willing to talk peace. They're willing to stop their nuclear program for security guarantees. Now, I can't believe that the North Korean government is that dumb, because the U.S. has played this game before. Surrender your weapons of deterrence and we promise we won't invade you. And then they get invaded. So I've been saying all along, what may really be happening inside that meeting house between the 2 delegations is they're talking reunification. And according to a story that came out of the Express in Great Britain, yeah, Kim Jong-un is saying he's now open to the idea of reunification. Moon Jae-in has been in favor of the Sunshine Policy all along. If they walk out of that building and say, we're now one united country. What's the U.S. government going to do? Bomb them anyway? Bomb Seoul, South Korea? Now, Trump is out there hailing the progress on North Korea, but warns against false hope. Don't get your hopes up, because they don't want peace, they want the war. Another article here, and we've talked about this one before as well. Press TV. An analyst has concluded whenever there is an easing of tensions between the two Koreas, Washington sends a signal to Seoul to pull back. And I have absolutely no doubt that Washington, D.C. is on the teletype or the phone or the email to Seoul right now saying, no reunification. Don't you dare do it. Isn't that really up to the Koreans? Now, the USS Carl Vinson is in port in Vietnam, the first U.S. warship to be in a Vietnamese port since the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. And it seems that the U.S. may be trying to bring Vietnam into this little clique to deter China. And so far it's Japan, Australia, and India. Now they're trying to get Vietnam in there. We'll see what happens. I don't think it's really been long enough for the people of Vietnam to have forgotten what America did in their country. China reveals the largest defense budget in 3 years. They know what's coming. They're starting to get ready for it. Now, down in Somalia, strategic progress remains elusive in America's expanded air campaign against al-Shabaab. And I'm willing to bet that most of you probably had forgotten we also had a war going on in Somalia. But in 2017, the United States conducted twice as many airstrikes against al-Shabaab as it did in 2016, 31 strikes compared to 15. Last week, U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, launched an airstrike that killed 2 al-Shabaab members near Jilib, a supposed stronghold of the Somali jihadist organization allied with al-Qaeda. But al-Qaeda kind of works for us. I smell another regime change in the air. Remember, Africa is a ripe target. It is the largest store of undeveloped natural resources on the planet. Most other places have been mined out, fished out, panned out. Africa is just full of stuff. And that's the new prize in the new world wars. Who gets Africa? Story out of 12160. According to a whistleblower or leak, the CIA was actually behind Operation Fast and Furious. And the government allowed the Mexican drug cartels to import tons of cocaine. Now, for those of us who've been following the Cocaine Importation Agency's adventures since Arkansas in the 1980s, this is not going to be a surprise. The CIA has been buddy-buddy with all these drug cartels all this time, and the CIA profits handsomely from their license to smuggle. Another story in 12160. New Fast and Furious documents confirm exactly what Eric Holder wanted to hide. And it comes from an internal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Public Affairs Talking Points memorandum, in which the ATF acknowledged that Fast and Furious was being used to push for more gun control by saying, look at all those out-of-control guns down there. We can't let that happen here. We caused that down there. It's amazing. And the hypocrisy. The U.S. is sending deadly weapons, fully automatic weapons, or burst weapons rather, to terrorists and to drug lords. But we're not allowed to have the semi-automatic versions. That's the double standard and the hypocrisy, which tells us how criminal our entire government has become. They're doing business with criminals. They're doing business with terrorists. They're doing business with druggies. Washington, D.C. isn't a capital, it's a crime scene. Now, 2 of the Navy officers who've been charged in the Fat Leonard scandal are heading to court-martial's hearings today in separate courtrooms at the Naval Base Norfolk in Virginia. This is Captain John F. Steinberger and Commander Jason Starmer are going to have their cases heard at a general court-martial. Now, the scandal, we talked about this before. It gets its name from a 6-foot, 3-inch tall, 350-pound Malaysian businessman named Leonard Glenn Francis, nicknamed Fat Leonard, who also ran Glenn Defense Marine Asia, a Singapore-based company that provided resupply and port services to Navy ships in Asia and 7th Fleet. Francis admitted last year to cheating the Navy for $35 million. He has yet to be sentenced. Some 60 U.S. naval officers are caught up in this web of corruption. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
And you can't make that up. What a name. Fat Leonard Scandal, huh?
Yeah.
Can't make it. Mike, I got to complain about, two of your callers the other day. One was from San Francisco. Now, I thought Bill Clinton balanced the budget by taking money out of Social Security.
Yes, he did.
He looted Social Security. That gentleman kind of admitted that.
Yeah, I noticed. He was going so fast, I couldn't get a word in there, and I think that was his intention. We're getting targeted by a lot of shill callers these days.
And the gentleman from Puerto Rico saying, Trump's doing a good job. Trump hasn't done anything.
No, he hasn't.
He's either not doing anything. Yeah, he's being hampered by the deep state. Or, Mike, I'm starting to think Trump has his own deep state that's coming into power. I think this is a battle of oligarchies. This is what it's coming down to. I mean,
it could very well be. It could very well be. I mean, if you go on back again to, say, the middle of the last century, most of our political structure, the power families, had gotten rich off of alcohol during Prohibition. And so what we were seeing was a war of the oligarchies between the old alcohol money and the new illicit drug money. And it made our country a lot worse. Dustin, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, it's... You can almost feel this war coming on, can't you?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's like all the chess pieces are being moved around. I mean, my God, Mike, Trump ran as we're in a big fat bubble. He ran on bringing the troops home and stopping all this foreign,
so did Obama.
Getting involved in foreign.
So did Obama.
Yeah,
Obama was out there saying, my first day as president, I will end the war and I will bring our troops home. And we got lied to again. And
yeah.
we need to understand, we're always being lied to by the government, by the corporate media. We've got to stop believing and trusting these people. We're in this abusive relationship. We're suffering citizen abuse at the hands of the government and the media.
Yeah, how many more people are we going to vote for that pull us, play us as fools? I mean, Mike, you know what crushed me? That caller from San Francisco was right on a few points about, like, Carl Icahn. Right there, he had inside information like Martha Stewart had. Yes. This is the kind of crap, that we got to deal with, and then everybody else gets shafted. Trump's a lost cause. Sorry to say it.
I'm afraid you're right. I'm afraid you're right. The only way I'll support him in 2020 is if Hillary runs again.
But that's what we come to, Mike. The emperor has no clothes, and the empire is basically coming to a close. We had Hillary Clinton versus Trump. This of all the people in this country, this is what we ended up with. Doesn't that tell anybody something? Yeah. I know people still support Trump, but I mean, it comes a time, you got to drop. You got to drop him. I don't know how many more chances he's going to get. Why is Sessions still there? Why isn't he fired anybody in the CIA, the NSA, and the DIA, and the FBI? He has the power. He hasn't done anything like that. What is he waiting for? The last day of his term? I mean, I don't understand. Those people should have all been gone. He let these people come about him, he could have got rid of these people the first day and they wouldn't have been having to deal with this crap.
I agree with you on that one. I've been saying that was Trump's biggest mistake coming into the White House. He wanted to be magnanimous in victory and keep the holdovers, thinking that because he was now the boss that they would be loyal and obedient, because that's the way it works in business. It's not the way it works in Washington, D.C. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody has secret connections and secret controllers.
But I mean, like, we talked about the trade, the tariffs and stuff. All the tariffs is a tax on the American people, because you'll be paying more for that 6-pack of canned beer, washing machines, cars, this or that. I mean, it's a sneaky tax, just like Obamacare was. It's a sneaky. It's not benefit. The steel companies are not going to build new factories, like you said. It's the Rust Belt. That's the name for a reason.
Yes. All right. Well, listen. Yeah, Dustin, we got to let you go. We got to take a station identification break, and we'll be back with hour 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2, and we're going to go right to the telephones to Chuck in Texas. Aloha, Chuck. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I don't know if you recall or not, but about, 6 weeks ago or so, I called and saying, we need to dump Trump. We need to stop supporting him in every way because he's betraying us. I think it's now becoming apparent, especially with this latest grab your guns and then go to the judicial review thing.
Yeah.
That I think people are beginning to realize I was right. And I think it's time we do not support him. Yes, he's being attacked, but I think that's all been a big kabuki dance. Defend me because the ones you hate are attacking me. Well, he's betrayed us on every major issue. And it's time we we need the resistance back.
Well, it's been a year. It's been a year, and Trump has had a lot of adversity and turmoil within the White House. He's definitely being cornered, corralled by people in Washington, D.C. who absolutely hate his guts. But even trying to give him all the benefit of the doubts, we're not getting the Donald Trump we voted for. We're not hearing anything out of Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Vaccine Safety Commission. He's already shut down the Election Integrity Commission, and all he's doing is having the Department of Homeland Security check the electronic voting machines to make sure they can't be hacked, forgetting that the hacking of the electronic voting machines happened at the point of manufacture. He certainly did not keep his promise to get us out of these wars all around the world, and I'm failing to see that he has actually done all that much beneficial for the economy. I know we're constantly being told he did, but to me things are virtually identical to where they were. I'm sorry, but I've given up on Trump. I don't think he's going to work out. He's going to be a one-term president, and maybe that's all he wanted, to be president and say, I'm one of the presidents of the United States of America. I've had 4 years. I'm out of here, and I'm going to go play golf.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I've taken so much grief from people, espousing my point of view on Trump. Oh, you're a libtard, and but Hillary would have been worse, and all those other excuses.
But Hillary would have been worse.
I'm just glad people.
Hillary
yes,
would have
she
been
would
worse.
have,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But the lesser of two evils is just evil getting there a little bit slower. And I think finally with this, confiscating guns without a court order, I think we can finally, just say, okay, we're done. We're not going to support him in any way. Yes, Pence is going to be a real pain, but at least we know what to expect. One thing, at least in Obama, we knew he was the enemy. And, Pence is going to be the enemy, but this sneak enemy is what I really resent.
All right, now I need to put a comment in here. I need to put a comment in here. I'm not going to support Donald Trump, but neither am I going to do anything to try and cause him harm, either politically or physically, because he is the elected president of the United States of America, and this is supposed to be a nation of laws. And so we want to be very, very careful here. Trump is a disappointment, but he's going to be the president for the next 3 years.
Yes, I absolutely agree, but we need to take off the rose-colored glasses, and whenever people say, well, we have to support Trump because he would be better than, we say, no, he's doing wrong, and it's time we started pointing it out, getting the resistance back up again so that we recognize he's just another part of the problem again. Mike, I appreciate your show so much, man. You're the news guy for me every day.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Cody in Texas. Aloha, Cody. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, and just to set the record straight, I was a never Hillary, so that was my main option for voting for Trump. So he doesn't
Same
have
here.
like my, I'm not a blind sheeple like a lot of people are. My question to you is about tariffs, because I had struggled with this when I'm 60 years old, but I still remember my social studies class or whatever it was in. If tariffs don't work, why does the United States have to pay them?
Well,
all these other countries are charging us tariffs, and somehow we still manage to get our stuff in there and pay the tariffs. And yet
actually, no, we don't. We have a tremendous trade imbalance, and the tariffs are part of the issue, along with the fact that American products are overpriced and not of really good quality. But the trade imbalance is like almost $2 billion a day is going out of the country to buy imported goods. Then money is coming into the country to buy U.S. goods. So in point of fact, no, we're not really getting our products out to these other countries. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Now, originally, when this country was started,
you can cherry pick item per item as far as what we're exporting, what we're not exporting, etc. But I guarantee you, if it comes into this country, I've taken chips out of the country and had to pay duty on whatever I'm bringing back in. It's the same principle. If we send anything to Japan or wherever, we have to pay a duty on it. Call it a tariff, call it a duty, call it whatever you want to, but we are still paying to put our goods in foreigners' hands, and it's passed down along to the consumer. I'm in the trucking industry, so I completely get that passing the buck of the expense.
yes.
But that's kind of where my bottom line is. I heard a statistic this morning that the metals only account for, the imported metals only account for like 2% of imported steel. That just sounds, why is everybody throwing such a fit if it's only 2% metal coming in? This was on Fox News this morning.
Well, I think you may have misheard that, because I think it's 2% of our steel is coming in from China, and we don't really have an indigenous steel industry anymore. And I don't know where Fox is getting that number, but we import a lot of steel and aluminum from Canada, and they're very upset over the tariffs. Now, originally, tariffs were just a revenue-raising mechanism. When the United States was founded, there were no taxes on the people. The government funded itself through tariffs, import and export, and basically taxed the companies. And it was much simpler to administer. And
that was going to be my next point, is that we didn't used to have an income tax for that reason. So I'm kind of, I'm still in support. And if, here's the deal. Back when America was strong,
okay, Cody, you didn't let me complete what I wanted to say. Okay, which is, when this country was started, the government funded itself on tariffs. There were no taxes on the people. For one thing, it was impractical. Trying to go on out and find everybody. They didn't have, email and tracking and all the rest of that. But over time, tariffs have been used to balance trade and then ultimately as a weapon of economic war. Meanwhile, of course, the taxes have been dumped onto ordinary people, even though the Constitution expressly forbids a non-apportioned taxation. Okay?
All right. I think there's still, I think Trump he's kind of pulled the lid off of this Pandora's box, and I'm hoping that it is a tool for negotiation where we can get this more of a fair trade, and that's kind of where I was going with it. That I'm hoping that this is simply a tool, whether it's somebody's got a thumb in the eye today, but it may actually open up into a better deal for everybody involved when it's all said and done.
The big problem we have here is we as a nation don't have all that much to trade with. Again, nobody wants our GMO agriculture, and American manufacturing is in decline. we don't actually make a lot of stuff.
Not just in decline; it's almost non-existent.
Yeah, it is.
It's starting to come back.
So what are we going to trade to these other countries? That's the big issue. Anyway, listen, Cody, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. And back to Tom in Indiana. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I want to take you back to the 1950s, to Lorain, Ohio, to U.S. Steel. My grandfather worked there, retired in the 50s, early 50s. I remember the orange haze in the air. It was on all the property. It was on his car. It was on the sandstone house that he had. It was all over. You could smell when you got away from Lorain, Ohio. The air smelled better. And even all along there, they had all these railroad trains that ran on coal and stuff. And for a kid, it was really something to see back then.
Yes.
And now today, if you get stopped by a train that's a mile long, you see all that steel. Then you look on the rail, you see all that steel. Then you go along the highway and you see the highway rails and stuff. We really need to get back to making steel again.
Yes.
We can't import steel. This is our wherewithal to stay a free country. We have to have steel. And whatever it costs, I don't care if Joe Six-Pack has to pay more. I don't care if you have to pay $200 more for a car. I used to work in an auto factory, and I remember when NAFTA came and everybody was promising this. Oh yeah, we'll take care of you if you get laid off. Yeah, we'll take care of you. I saw factory after factory after factory closed. Now Trump's doing something. He's putting his big boy pants on, his brass knuckles. He's gonna start these steel mills up again. We're going to have better air quality, but by God, we're going to have the wherewithal to make war if we have to make war, and not be subordinate to another country.
Well, you raise a very good point there. You raise a very good point. Once the war breaks on out, the global supply chains are all going to collapse, and if we're not self-sufficient in the production of war materiel, then we are going to lose. It's in fact one of the reasons why I think the U.S. is destined to lose this war.
Here's another thing, though, Mike. If something happens and they knock out the web, how are you going to pay your checks? How are you going to do this? How are you going to order groceries? How's anything going to happen? I don't have a phone anymore that's on a wire. How do I communicate with anybody? If they take out this web, we're doomed. We're doomed. So what we have to do is roll up our sleeves and get back to the basics. It's going to hurt a lot because a lot of people are lazy. A lot of people sold their businesses. I don't want to say I did. I sold my business and I put my money in the stock market and I lost. But that was years ago. But I can see it all coming again. We really need to roll up our sleeves and get this country back to work.
Well, that's going to be really hard because due to Common Core and liberalism, the younger generation, they're overly sensitive. I can just imagine how they're going to collapse from workplace adversity. Plus, there's a huge problem with liberalism, that sense of entitlement, that the government should just give them stuff. In fact, I think liberalism could be defined as all of life's losers demanding stuff from all of life's winners. But there are so many parts of our nation that are broken. It all needs to be fixed together at the same time. You can't just say, we're going to start building factories. You have to say, we're going to build the factories. We're going to reopen the mines for the iron ore. We got to start training young people that working in a factory is not a bad thing. It's not socially inferior. And start reviving the work ethic. One of the problems with our current college education system, people are going through and getting a degree in stuff that has no relevance in real life, and then they walk on out and wonder why they can't find a decent job.
I can agree with you on that. I know education's the big part, and that was the beginning of them taking this country apart. It was once they got into the education and dumbing down our kids. I'll tell you that the founders that wrote up the Declaration of Independence are so much smarter than the college graduates with a doctor's degree today.
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson was an absolute genius. There's no question about that. Okay.
Well, that's all I get to say for you today. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
All right, Tom, we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Dan in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. I hate to pick on you like the other callers, but I think you're wrong on the tariff issue. I think you're kind of pushing the globalist agenda, actually, with saying tariffs are bad. Because it's the globalists that want no tariffs because they'd rather have a global economic system instead of a national system.
Well, no, I'm saying that tariffs are bad because historically they haven't worked over the long run before. And I'm also saying that because we're not ready to start up steel production. Maybe aluminum, yes, but it's not like imposing the tariff.
Okay, wait. You said something that's totally false. Tariffs, if you look at the tariff rate from the Civil War till about after World War II, was 25%.
Well, look, remember when Bush put out his tariff, and that backfired on us terribly. And we've already, I mean, the world is already hostile. The world is already hostile enough, and everybody's on edge. And Trump's tariffs have angered Canada, Mexico, basically all of the steel and aluminum producing countries. Now, if we weren't on the edge of a world war, I'd say we can all deal with it. But I think everybody's getting close to a breaking point. I would love to see the U.S. become self-sufficient and be able to close its borders. But the infrastructure isn't there. Okay, it's going to take years to build.
It's all been shipped away, though.
It's going to take. It's going to take years to build enough steel factories where we're going to be able to do our own domestic production and then get out from under the tariff. All the tariff is going to do is take money out of the pockets of the American people and put it in the government's pocket. That other caller was right. It's just another hidden tax. It's not going to revive our it's not.
I mean, your philosophy is what they've been doing is why America's in the shape it is, because we've shipped all the jobs to cheaper countries. I mean, the reason we don't make bicycles in America is
Dan, okay, let me make my point, okay? These tariffs are not going to bring back the steel industry overnight. So we're going to have about 2 years, 3 years maybe, while we're getting all of our ducks in a row, where the tariff is just a tax on the American people, and we're still using foreign-sourced steel and aluminum.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be a painful, it will take a little adjustment period, but in the long run, you're better off because you have your own steel industry,
I just think at this particular time, it wasn't a good idea, because now we're talking literally economic warfare across the globe. Everybody's on edge from this. Anyway, Dan, thank you for the phone.
Yeah, I don't like the way he does it sporadically. I think they should impose like a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports or all imports in general, and that would probably create 10 million jobs right there, on all kinds of stuff like bicycles or shoes or whatever, instead of just sporadic hit and miss, but I mean, the reason we don't make bicycles is
what we're missing. Dan, what we're missing is a workforce that is trained to make things rather than sit around and talk about abortion and global warming. And the technology, we have fallen behind in manufacturing technology to these other countries. The iPhone is made in China because they can make it. Nobody in this country can make it. That's a real problem. We've got to catch that up. When Seymour Cray was designing his supercomputers, he didn't even bother approaching American chip makers. He went right to Japan because they had the technology to fabricate the chips he needed. What is really painful to see here, what is really, Dan,
I think the first step is the tariff to create the factory, to create the demand for labor so people get the jobs and then they get trained to do this stuff.
Okay. Dan, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here because you keep interrupting me, and I'm trying to make a point here. You keep saying the tariffs will bring back the jobs. We can't have jobs if we don't have trained young people to take them. We can't have jobs that will compete with the global economy until we have the factories and technology that matches these other countries. We have fallen behind. And it's really painful to see, because following the Apollo moon program and all the technology that came out of that, it created the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We leapt ahead of the world. And then short-sighted corporate CEOs decided, well, we'll just license off the manufacturing to these other countries. We don't have to bother manufacturing anything. So the problem is that the tariffs are not going to bring back the jobs back, because we don't know how to do what we used to know how to do. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, and then we're going to close the lines for a little while, because I'm way, way behind on my talking points. So, Wayne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Thanks a lot. I just wanted to call in. I caught the tail end of the previous caller's conversation, so I didn't hear it all. But I remember from the free trade debates that when you bring back factories and have factory workers, you have a factor of almost 5 to 6 to 1, where you're going to have clerical, management, accounting, supervisory positions that go with it, as well as the surrounding community. Now you have some restaurants, you have some gas stations, you have people shopping in the close proximity of what's going on. So we can't forget that if we can figure out a way to make this happen, that's where some of this economic growth can happen, because we saw what happened to some towns where factories were closed down.
Yes.
They just, all the jobs left, and a lot of people had to leave. So it's a possibility if we can make it happen. But my real reason for calling is I was talking to a guy today who's got a lot of money and has some businesses, but he says that never in his lifetime has he seen a president keep so many of the promises that he made during the campaign trail. Now, I'm not a Trump toady or anything, but the thing a lot of people don't realize is by Trump making a big push against illegal immigration, kicking out MS-13 and some of these gangs, we are saving some lives. We can't quantify it yet, but there are lives.
I agree with you on that one. I agree with you that Trump is keeping his word on the immigration. I'm having a hard time finding other areas where he has kept his promises. He certainly did not keep his promise to put Hillary in jail.
Okay, I understand that, but again, he improved veterans' health care. He may have saved some lives already with the big push there. He's also overturning Obama executive orders that shut down coal mines. So I think he's really kept a lot of families together by overturning these EOs. And now the guy I was talking to has a coal mine in Utah that's being reopened, and they're getting after it with some new jobs and everything.
Okay,
and so
that's a good thing.
So, and also with free trade, I'm an electronics business, and we saw total devastation in the 80s and 90s with the free trade. So many factories closed, and we knew at the time Japan and China were dumping just to gain market share. They get the market share, boom, they started raising prices left and right, because now it's a captive audience. So having, again, I don't know what the formula is, but I can guarantee you the fact that these guys are being put on the spotlight to come up with some kind of idea how to challenge this, then, at least we're making some progress. Add in Gorsuch and the tax cuts. I don't think he's done a bad job, but again, I'm not an apologist. But I think that guy in Texas, I just don't believe, that he can be, that naive that he doesn't understand some of this stuff. I think there's been some very, very good pluses. Trump's not going to do it all. He's only been in 1 year, and if he wants to take out Hillary, I think he can do it. He has to work the back rooms of Congress and other places with his people and come up with enough support to make something like that happen, because it'd be a major, major political uproar over it.
Okay, well, let me comment on that. First of all, the Trump tax cut benefited primarily the ultra wealthy. Ordinary middle Americans are not going to see much of a benefit from it whatsoever. There have been one or two companies who have issued bonuses because of the tax cuts, but Trump is basically repeating Reagan's trickle-down theory. Where they were going to give huge tax cuts to the ultra-rich, and then the money would trickle down from the rich to the lower classes, and basically it did not happen. In fact, a lot of these ultra-rich started looking for places to shelter their money offshore. Now, as far as the veterans' health care is concerned, it is abysmal, but if I recall correctly, while the defense spending budget has been increased, I think they actually cut back on the VA yet again. So that may be a push on that one. But the big promises that Trump campaigned on, vaccine safety, Hillary in jail, stopping the wars, was absolutely the biggest one. And he just hasn't delivered on any of those. He was going to make sure that the elections were completely honest. And he's closed his election integrity commission. So he's done a few things that seem to be of little interest to the really ultra-powerful, but when you get close to that narcocracy, he's absolutely blocked. Now, yes, he's got another 3 years, and if he turns around and starts getting some of this stuff done, I will apologize, but right now, I've lost confidence in him. And that's just the way it is. Anyway, Wayne, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we get back to the news because I'm way, way behind it. Okay, we were talking about the war and so forth. And apparently, according to this article over in Air Force Times, the availability rate of mission-capable aircraft has been in a long, slow decline. And apparently right now, about 71% of the Air Force's aircraft are flyable at any given time last year. And that was a drop from the year before, and the trend is continuing. And former Air Force pilots and leaders say that this is a gigantic red flag. Now, we know that part of the problem is that some of these aircraft are just not built very well. F-22 still asphyxiating its pilots. Huge list of problems with the F-35. And it all goes back to the fact that our military-industrial complex is all about money, not about quality weapons. More about this when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're talking about this story where the number of Air Force planes that are mission-capable has been in decline for apparently several years, and it's down to basically 71%. It's less than 3/4. And if you're in a shooting war, you really can't afford to have 1/4 of your aircraft being hangar queens. And part of the issue is that, again, the military-industrial complex is not putting out a good product. We keep hearing about all these problems with all these ships and aircraft because the military-industrial complex is all about making money, not really all that concerned about the poor kid who has to actually use the weapon system. You know, when you look at the history of military acquisition, sometimes it can be a joke. And I've often mentioned this book and movie, The Pentagon Wars, as a perfect illustration because it documents the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle and shows just how messed up the whole process is and how it's all about money and promotions and the kids out there, they get stuck with stuff that doesn't really work. I went to one of the air shows they had over here at Kaonohi Bay Marine Air Station, and there was a Seahawk anti-submarine helicopter on display, and over on the port side there was this weird little device that had been attached that actually blocked about 1/3 of the tubes through which sonobuoys are launched. And so I talked to the sonar operator and I said, doesn't that get in the way? And he says, yeah. I said, why do you have it on there? And they said, they ordered us to put it on there. It's not well thought out. It's let's just slap some stuff on there. And one of the reasons that the F-35's performance is so slow is that the U.S. loves this idea of a multi-role aircraft that is basically built to do everything. And the Russian aircraft are built for specific missions, and that's why they're lighter, faster, more maneuverable. The Russian aircraft are sports cars, and America's military aircraft are basically campers, where everything is shoved in there, including a kitchen sink. Now, Harry Truman actually had to deal with this before World War II, because the U.S. was arming itself, and they were spending huge amounts of money, and they weren't getting quality goods. And Truman made a big stink about it. It's one of the things that popularized him with the general public. Now, Putin is out there pointing out that Russia's weapons exports got a huge boost out of Syria because everybody got to see those Russian weapons working in a real combat situation, and they did very, very well. So even America's military weapons for export business is in decline. I'll tell you what the solution is ultimately going to be. We have fallen way behind the rest of the world in making the products that are made today. So we need to take a lesson from the post-Apollo technology boom. We have to come up with new materials, new processes, new products that other countries don't have. And we need to keep them here and start making products with them that other countries will then come and want to buy. And that's why one of the areas in which I do agree with Donald Trump is the revival of our civilian space program, because it is a civilian technology incubator. Military technology is kept under wraps. By the time it's declassified, it's useless for any commercial purposes. But again, look to the example following Apollo, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the technology boom, Silicon Valley. And we had the advantage. We were making all this stuff. We were selling it around the world. And then our corporate CEOs, who basically grew up in the era of the MBA degree and not having to actually walk the factory floor, just said, oh, we'll make it overseas. It's cheaper there. And our factories shut down. Our communities suffered. And those people who actually knew how to get things done were lured away to other countries, where I'm sure they're being treated with the respect that they deserve for knowing how to make things. And Wall Street started getting into this idea that they could all get rich just by shaking the money back and forth and it would grow automatically. And as long as the Federal Reserve keeps creating more money out of thin air, it has the appearance of working, but not the reality. The director at Cross Border Capital is saying gold is the best safe asset. It certainly is one of them. Again, you shouldn't turn your nose up at silver. And retail investor bullishness collapses. Now, yesterday we had an article where we were talking about all these iconic, well-known retail chains are just closing store after store after store. They're going into bankruptcy because we, the American people, don't have any money to go down to the shopping malls with. So TD Ameritrade's Investor Movement Index, which tries to measure investor enthusiasm about certain sectors, is saying that retail investor bullishness has just collapsed. I looked at the chart, and it's been bouncing up and down, but lately it just almost straight line down. Now, apparently, okay, this Dave Kranzler of Investment Research Dynamics is talking about an article that Paul Craig Roberts sent him that was written by Catherine Austin Fitts. And it's basically about the state of America's pension funds. And Dave Kranzler is saying the pension crisis is about to detonate. And Dave is out there saying that actually this is just part of a continuing phenomenon of using crisis and bubbles to take real wealth away from the middle class and give it to the wealthy. And he points as an example to the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud, which when that disaster was over, American homeowners had lost their equity, if not their home outright, to the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars. And the rich banks all got bailed out at taxpayer expense, except for AIG, which went bust because of the derivatives exposure. Right now in this country, 42% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved, and they're probably going to retire broke. And we know that Social Security is also in trouble. Now, here's an interesting court ruling. Up in Seattle, there was a gentleman, homeless, who's been living in his truck. And the city wanted to basically seize it and sell it to pay for unpaid parking tickets and fines. And the judge in the case ruled that the truck now constitutes his home and the city may not seize it. And of course, this is going to affect hundreds of homeless people who are living in their vehicles in the state of Washington. And I think that's a humane decision to make. And that's something that really is in short supply in our country, is humanity, simple humanity. In fact, I would say it's an endangered species. Now, getting on back to the tariffs, Trump says he's not backing down on tariffs. Germany is now screaming. The car industry is panicking. saying that this is going to erode profit margins. It's going to make their cars more expensive to send to the United States, to a population where we already have a surplus of cars. That's why we got our little Hyundai at the absolute amazing price that we did. They're stacking up. Down at the bottom of the hill, there's a former drive-in movie theater, 4-screen. They've taken the screens down, and when we first moved here, it was being used for flea markets and farmers markets where you could get fresh produce. Now it is being rented out to Oahu's car dealerships as an overflow lot. Because the 2018s are in, they still got unsold 2017s. They're all down there on that lot. I kept telling Claire, let's not buy a new car. Let's just take one of those. They'll never miss it. Now, as you know, Canada and Mexico are very upset over the tariffs, and Trump is now saying that he will consider a tariff exemption for Canada and Mexico. And what we're going to see happen is he's going to start issuing exemptions to all of the friendly countries, which means it's a targeted tariff specifically against places like China. Now, as you know, Venezuela is in serious, serious trouble, and it's hovering right on the edge. It's been the victim of U.S. economic warfare for decades. The U.S. is already talking about a military intervention to save those poor Venezuelan civilians from the wrath of the evil government. And Russia and China are basically stepping on in. They're extending massive credits to Caracas. They don't want Venezuela to die. They don't want it to basically be taken over by a puppet government run by the United States of America. So they're working to keep Venezuela going. Venezuela is still trying to get their cryptocurrency going, and apparently it's proving very popular. They've already sold billions and billions of the petros. And that, of course, is very annoying to the private central bankers. The idea of a widespread currency that is not under their control and not paying them interest. Now, over in South Africa, the ramifications of their new president are just starting to sink in. First of all, he comes on into office, and the first thing he says is, we're going to take land away from the white farmers and give it to the black farmers. Now, they tried that in Zimbabwe, and it triggered a financial disaster, which means that is likely to what's going to happen in South Africa as well. What is really amazing is South Africa's new president is totally focused on this redistribution of wealth plan, and apparently so far still ignoring the fact that Cape Town is running out of water. They're already on rationing, and he's not doing anything about that. Now, as you know, the mayor of Oakland issued a warning that the Immigration Customs Enforcement were going to be making a sweep through the city, and as a result, some 800 illegal immigrants with criminal records were able to evade the sweep. Now, Jeff Sessions, who's eager to prove that he's got some value as the Attorney General, is apparently opening an investigation against Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf for obstruction of justice. And he ought to. He really ought to. This liberal fascination with completely open borders is nonsense. They've even admitted they're doing it because they're expecting all the illegal immigrants to vote Democrat in the elections, even though illegal immigrants aren't supposed to vote at all. It's a flagrant disregard for the laws involved here. Now, as you know, Italy just had their elections, and the two major Eurosceptic parties have won. Now they're working on forming a coalition, but the pro-EU party took a major clubbing. They're probably feeling like a baby seal right about now. Basically, Italy just told the EU to F off. And Nigel Farage is saying this could trigger the end of the European Union between the Italian election results and the pending Brexit. I mean, there are other member states of the EU saying it's time to get out of here. And the primary issue tearing the EU apart are those open borders. and all the problems that have come in with those refugees. Even Angela Merkel has now been forced to admit there are now no-go zones in Germany. Now, believe it or not, Obama's UN ambassador, Samantha Power, came on out and said that Russia was behind the Italian election results, that the Italian people love the EU. They love their refugees. The only reason the election would have gone against the EU, it had to be those evil Russians hacking the election. I admire Samantha Power that she can keep such a straight face when she says nonsense like this. Now, here's a little bit of a breakthrough. There was a court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it had to do with the right to bond after arrest and to regular bond hearings for those who are in jail. And a case had been started to basically guarantee this right to illegal aliens who were thrown into detention without the opportunity for a bail bond and are not allowed to have a bond hearing. So in the case Jennings versus Rodriguez, the Supreme Court ruled 5-3 that detained aliens in the United States do not have the right to periodic bond hearings during the course of their detention. The significance of this is the Supreme Court is saying that illegal immigrants are not entitled to the rights of a U.S. citizen. And I think that's important to make. Certainly they're not entitled to the right to vote. Despite what the liberals want, doesn't really matter. Let's see. Somebody just sent me an article on the Bush White House and their steel tariff, and it didn't work back then. I'm going to put it up during this next commercial break. Now, French prosecutors have officially charged Marine Le Pen for tweeting against the ISIS terrorists. Now, the EU in Brussels are basically looking to bring down their biggest critics. President Macron is moving forward with charges against former French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen. And it's no secret the EU hates freedom of speech about as much as Israel and much of our current government does. And it all basically came about when she was charged with, she's going to be charged with circulating violent messages that incite terrorism. This was a series of tweets she sent after the massacre at the Paris concert at the Bataclan in 2015. Now, here's the point. She had previously immunity, and the French Parliament revoked that, making her guilty in reverse. Now, here in the United States, that would be illegal. It would be considered an ex post facto ruling. But again, the issue there was preventing the French people from becoming angry about the presence of all these refugees despite the terror attacks. The globalist agenda at work again. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. I'm going to get up this story about the failed steel tariff of the Bush era, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody just sent me a link to an article in time.com, talking about how Bush's steel tariff backfired horribly. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the story here. Basically, Bush had campaigned on a free trade agenda. He had a bunch of free trade supporters in his staff. But Bush enacted a tariff of between 8% to 30% on foreign steel, saying that the U.S. steel industry was hurt by foreign imports from overseas. And the Bush White House calculated or guessed that the benefits of helping steel workers outweighed the cost of angering allies and potentially driving up the price of consumer goods. But the imposition of the tariffs set off a chain reaction. The EU responded with tariffs of their own, and a number of countries disputed the tariffs at the World Trade Organization. Less than a year after the announced tariffs, the World Trade Organization ultimately ruled the U.S. had violated international trade agreements by imposing the tariffs, which opened the door for sanctions and retaliation. And in fact, the EU ended up hitting Bush where it hurt. The block plan tariffs on products produced in key swing states where job losses would hurt Bush's chances of re-election. And in late 2003, Bush had to rescind the tariffs. And now, basically, Trump is setting himself up for the same kind of confrontation. And as I said to that caller, the problem is right now the world is already on edge and ready for a war. And economic wars have a bad habit of mutating into real shooting wars. And that's why I don't think that this was a particularly good idea at this particular time. But it's not like Trump listens to me anyway here. All right. Over in Israel, they're getting ready to enact the plan that came out in January of this year. Asylum seekers have to choose between indefinite detention in an Israeli prison or going back to a third country in Africa. Now, Rwanda and Uganda are reported to be the countries accepting those deported from Israel, despite official denials from both governments. And I mention this to underscore the hypocrisy because Israel is at the forefront of those screaming for the U.S. and Europe to have open borders and just blend everybody together. But of course, Israel is the exception. They have to remain racially pure and so forth and so on. More good news. Apparently, a federal judge has ruled that Trump is within his authority as president to end DACA and basically shut it on down. And I know everybody's going to say, well, these poor children, they were brought to this country by their parents. It's not their fault. No, it's their parents' fault. If we'd had border enforcement, they wouldn't be here in the first place. You know what's really amazing about this whole immigration issue? Dwight Eisenhower shut down that border with Mexico with only 10% of the resources of the current immigration and customs enforcement. It was called Operation Wetback. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 3. We're going to keep the phone lines closed because I still got a lot of stuff to get through. I want to step on back to that point I was making about the poor quality of the military-industrial complex being a contributing factor to the Air Force only having 71% of their aircraft mission-ready, mission-capable. And I just saw this story from Sputnik Daily News. Apparently, for the F-35, the numbers are worse. Basically, of all the planes that have already been manufactured and deployed, only half of them are in flyable condition right now. And Lockheed Martin's F-35 executive director is out there saying, don't worry, we're going to fix it. One of these days, we'll get it right. Amazing. Now, getting on back to immigration and so forth. Over in California, they have basically declared the entire state a sanctuary for illegal immigrants. It's no longer just sanctuary cities or sanctuary counties, it's the whole state. And there was that big stink with the mayor of Oakland interfering with immigration and customs enforcement. But even though they're refusing to cooperate with federal government officers, they still want that federal government grant money. And they literally went to court to sue the U.S. government to keep sending money, even though California's government is in effect rebelling against the immigration laws. But surprisingly, a judge in Northern California basically ruled that the government doesn't have to pony up the cash until this matter of a sanctuary state issue can be hashed out fully in court, and that could take years. Now, quick little note from the Mandalay Bay shooting. The autopsy, the coroner's report on Stephen Paddock, the accused shooter, has been released, and surprisingly, elevated levels of mercury, arsenic, lead, selenium, and antimony were found in his body. I mean, really heavy dose. I'm not sure where that would have come from or if somebody was trying to poison him. But it is odd. It's very, very odd. Story over on 12160.info. Apparently, Antifa was photographed blocking a road with a sign reading, "Whiteness is Antichrist." Now, can you imagine if somebody went around with a sign that said, blacks are aligned with the devil, what the reaction would be? It would be horrible. Oh, we're outraged. We're absolutely so. But it's okay to say those things about white people. They deserve it. They're evil people. Israel, of course, is still pushing back hard on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and that tells us, in fact, that it's actually working. And apparently, some universities, are now demanding professors sign a contract that they will never boycott Israel before they're allowed to speak on campus. Now, that is a violation of the First Amendment right there. And personally, I would refuse an invitation to speak anywhere where I'm required to sign a contract that I won't boycott Israel, because boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest protected under the First Amendment. But Israel, boy, they hate that First Amendment. They hate that First Amendment. Also out in California, in Orange County, there was a high school, and apparently the students and staff members were smashing up a piñata made to look like President Trump. And somebody got it on video, and the video was put on the net, and it went viral, and everybody is upset. That's not what education in schools are supposed to be about. Story coming out of Oraz.com. 319 New York Police Department employees have committed fireable offenses, and yet they kept their job. And the offenses included excessive force, fighting, or unnecessarily firing their weapons. And we wonder why people aren't trusting the police any longer. Well, certainly after Parkland, you know, this idea, be disarmed, the police will take care of you. No, they won't. Parkland proved that. Now, Washington State has become the first state to pass a net neutrality law after the FCC repeal. Rented lips. And we're hearing other states are getting ready to do the same. And basically, the law will say, if you are an internet service provider in the state of Washington, in order to be in Washington, in order to do business in Washington, you will have to have common carrier type equal access. There will be no for-pay fast lanes. So I guess I'll still have an audience up in Washington State. Washington State was beautiful. I really loved it. Anyway, apparently last week, well, first of all, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Last week, the code repository GitHub was taken off air in a 1.3 terabits per second denial of service attack. This is from this new system called the Memcached DOS attack. And already Arbor Network is now reporting that a U.S. service provider suffered a 1.7 terabits per second attack. This is going to keep on. This is weaponized stuff. This is a nation state behind this. They're just testing it in the field. It's not enough they're going to scorch the surface of the earth in their war. They're going to wreck our internet. They're going to wreck everything. Now, we were talking before about Flippy, the burger flipping robot, and it's gone to work in California, and it's being installed in 50 locations. And obviously, you've heard my concern before that increased automation means increased unemployment, which means a slowing consumer economy. But I got to see a video of this thing, and that's really all it does. It's just an arm that's attached to the griddle, and it sees where the hamburger patties are with computer vision and just flips them on a regular basis. It still requires a human to put the burger patties on there. So it may be that the economic impact on the employment market won't be all that great, or the person who's putting the patties has other duties to do. I'm still very concerned about this idea of too much automation and robots displacing workers, because we've already got massive unemployment as it is. And we got to do something to fix that. Now, Saudi prosecution has accused YouTube of supporting terrorism. YouTube is about to get a taste of its own medicine here. Apparently, the Saudi public prosecutor has accused YouTube of contributing to spreading extremist ideology and helping recruit young people to join terrorist groups. Now, if these terrorist groups are fronts for the CIA, then obviously YouTube is going to be cooperating with them. But the prosecutor basically accused the defendants of 63 charges, including to listening to lectures by Daesh thinkers by YouTube. Now, these charges are against these 8 Saudis and 2 Yemenis accused at shooting at a security patrol in Riyadh. But basically, YouTube, which is banning conservatives, Trump supporters, vaccine questioners, are perfectly okay with their service being used for terrorists. It's rather odd. Then we come to the Online Hate Index. Now, the Online Hate Index is a joint initiative of the Anti-Defamation League's Center for Technology and Society and the University of California at Berkeley's D-Lab. And it's basically a machine learning system that can be deployed on internet content to discover the scope and spread of online hate speech. In other words, they're automating censorship. And if you want to know what the ADL is really all about, you need to go back and read about its origins. And it has to do with a story of rape and murder, and I'll dig it out and post it up on what really happened. But they're trying to automate censorship, and of course, what the ADL wants is to silence all comments and criticisms about Israel. They could care less about anything else. But apparently they are now making this available to YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So now YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook will now be enforcing the Anti-Defamation League's requests for censorship on free speech. Like I said, Israel hates the First Amendment here. Now, Facebook claims to be working on what they call a mind-reading project. And they're saying it's all about improving our lives. Really, honest, that's it. And basically, according to Regina Dugan, the new technology, you won't have to worry about being rude when you check messages. If Facebook's mind-reading software is successful, you'll never need to actually look at your screen or type on your smart device. Facebook will simply read your thoughts. They have 60 employees working on this, and they're trying to develop non-invasive sensors that can measure your brain waves, decoding the brain signals associated with language. Basically, the software will decode the words you're thinking as you think them and translate them directly into your device. I would be interested in seeing a demonstration, but I'm not sure I would actually want one myself. There's another development project out there where they're claiming to have this computer that can literally put on a computer display what you are visualizing in your head, your imagination. I get very nervous at this blending of computers and the brain. I mean, look how badly they messed our brains up with those prescription antidepressants. Now they want to plug us into a computer. Here's a story. This is going to be a facepalm moment. You've probably heard of this 30,000-year-old artifact called the Venus of Willendorf. And it is an iconic piece of archaeology. It was discovered in the early 20th century in the Austrian village of Willendorf. It is the centerpiece of the Natural History Museum in Vienna. And anybody who studies archaeology is going to know what this statue is. And it is the earliest known prehistoric artistic representation of a woman. And to be very honest, she's very voluptuous. And Facebook has deemed this image as dangerous pornography. That's how ridiculous this censorship thing, it's out of control. And they're sowing the seeds of their own destruction. In fact, there's an article over at Investment Watch blog. This is the beginning of the end of the dominance of Google, Facebook, Twitter. They'll probably still be around in 10 years, but much, much smaller. Kind of like CNN and MSNBC and NBC News and ABC News and so forth and so on. Apparently, scientists are now confirming the presence of radioisotopes from Fukushima in the mainland United States of America. And the largest amount of Fukushima radiation fell on the U.S. West Coast and the Pacific. Maybe that's why the Californians are acting as weird as they are. And people need to realize the danger of contamination. Now, you can buy an inexpensive radiation meter on eBay, but you need to get one that will pick up alpha radiation, because a lot of these nucleotides, that's what they're emitting. And the really low-end, cheap Geiger counters only pick up beta and gamma radiation, which is also bad as well here. Just after they're cleaning up from the last one, there is another major winter storm that's going to hit the Northeast tomorrow. And I've been trading text messages and emails with my family back there. During the last storm, some of my relatives actually had to go to a hotel because they lost power and they didn't have emergency preparations. And they're caring for an elderly member of the family who's very, very fragile. So they had to go here. New Jersey is looking at a forecast up to 12 inches possible from this next storm. Over in Great Britain, they're dealing with snowmageddon. The grocery stores are all emptied out. Apparently, some of the stores are being charged with price gouging for certain staples like bread. And it's a bad one. And we still have a little bit more of winter to get through. This has been a record-setting winter. They've been setting all-time cold weather records all over the northern hemisphere. Now, the British Antarctic Survey was heading on down to study the iceberg A68. And it's the world's largest iceberg. It is gigantic. And apparently they couldn't get to it because of all the sea ice. Remember, they keep sending these ships down there to document global warming, and they keep getting into trouble here. Story out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. One of the things that the global warming people like to say, when you point out that space satellite photos are showing places like the Ross Ice Shelf is actually growing, and they say, no, it's just thinner. It's melting from below. It's melting from below. Global warming is melting it from below, and it's just spreading out. Well, as it turns out, scientists who are doing core samples have found the Ross Ice Shelf is actually freezing, and they have no idea why. Because they truly believe in human-caused global warming. This just can't be happening. Now, Susan Crockford, who is arguably the world's greatest polar bear expert, has some really bad news for the Carbonazis. As you know, the poster child for the climate doom is the polar bear. Remember that photo they put out of this polar bear on this little piece of ice saying, see, he's clinging to the last bit of ice and he's going to drown. Well, first of all, they took that picture in summer when the ice is supposed to melt, and polar bears can swim. More than that, they can float. That fur is hollow for greater thermal insulative effect, and that makes it buoyant. Polar bears can sleep floating on the water. But so polar bears are doing great, according to Susan Crockford. Polar bear populations are stable, if not growing. That stuff you read in the liberal media about bears starving to death because the summer ice is pure nonsense. The only evidence we have that polar bears are in any kind of trouble is the fake evidence of activist computer models. Oh, my stars, they lied to us. They lied to us. Okay, now, they're calling it bombogenesis for the new storm. Ireland is buried in snow. The jet streams are starting to shift. It's causing a little bit of problem for the airlines. And this last storm that went through was really bad. And over at Mount Vernon, there was this 227-year-old tree that traditionally is believed to have been planted by George Washington himself. And it's been toppled. I don't know if there's a tree surgeon that can put it back together. If it broke the trunk, that's it. If it just uprooted, they may be able to replant it. So hopefully that's going to work out really good. Now, apparently, there is a court case. It's up in the Northern District of California, and it has to do with water fluoridation. And the Environmental Protection Agency sought to limit the information available to the court while making their decision on whether or not to ban water fluoridation. Now, the lawsuit was brought forth by Food and Water Watch Incorporated, coalition of health organizations and individuals concerned about fluoride, as well they should be. So, as the lawsuit proceeded, the EPA interpreted the language of the law to mean the judge should be limited to reviewing just the information the EPA provided when it decided to reject the original petition in February of this year. And the disagreement is whether, in reaching its own decision, the court can consider information the EPA did not provide. And the judge said, yeah, I can look at anything I need to look at to figure out what's going on. But what an arrogant thing for the EPA to say. You're only allowed to look at the stuff that we present you. It's like, it's just EPA propaganda. It's not science. The EPA is, well, they're just as crooked as anybody else on the global warming scam. They're part of it. All right, we're going to take a commercial break here. We're going to start opening the phone lines here for the rest of the show, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go to the phones, starting with Laura in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I forced myself today to watch the APAC meeting on C-SPAN. And first I saw Netanyahu talk about what friends are, countries are. And then Rubio and Coons have legislation to fully fund security for Israel. So we can fully fund security for Israel. That's the Coons-Rubio legislation. And they talked about how there's one thing about Congress we're bipartisan about, he said. And the one thing is, we're all for Israel. We're bipartisan that way.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
You have to watch it. It's horrible.
I'm not going to watch it. I can't stand it. You know, I only have the one TV set, and I can't afford to throw things at it.
You can write down who the traitors are, like Mendez
yeah,
from New Jersey, you know.
Menendez, I think it is.
Coons and Rubio.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested, they probably go to C-SPAN archives.
There's a very loud military plane flying around outside my window right now. Anyway, anything else, Laura?
I see the handwriting on the wall. They really want the United States to attack Iran. That's going to be next.
Yeah, it is going to be next, and it's going to trigger a world war. You know, at some point, Russia and China are going to say this appeasement thing isn't working. The Neville Chamberlain had the wrong idea, and if we just sit here and let the United States pick off country after country after country, they're coming for us eventually anyway. It bodes ill for the entire world.
That's right, exactly. I don't blame them one bit. The way our country's, we're run by, when I saw that Netanyahu was in town, I said to my husband, well, the boss was here.
Yeah. Yeah, we're under puppet rule, just like Libya or Yemen was under. Now they're trying to take their country back, just like Afghanistan is. We're ruled by a foreign power, Israel. And Washington, D.C. is a Vichy government that is collaborating with this foreign power to run this country, not for the benefit of the American people, but for the benefit of that foreign power, providing endless amounts of money, not to mention soldiers and military equipment, so that Israel can go on attacking and killing its neighbors.
Yeah, they're whipping up hatred against Hezbollah. Hezbollah's been, haven't they been this kind of security for Lebanon?
Yes, they are. and Israel wants to get rid of Hezbollah because once Hezbollah is gone, Israel can invade Lebanon, see some of the land there, the Litani River, some other assets that they covet.
So I bet you within 30 days we attack Iran, the way they're sounding.
I would. I don't know about Iran, but I'm expecting Israel to go into Lebanon almost immediately because Netanyahu's own cabinet is starting to turn on him, and he needs a war to distract the media and the people away from just how corrupt he's become.
Well, isn't that great, though? We're going to fully fund Israel's security.
I find it disgusting. We can't even fund our own security. Our borders are completely wide open.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, why are we paying for a wall for Israel when we can't even afford our wall down here on the Mexican border? I mean, it's insane. It is just completely insane.
That's right. It is. It is. Okay, thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Steve Elkins. And Steve, I'm probably going to have to take you over this next commercial break, but let's get started. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to say you're firing on all cylinders today about Israel. You know, I read that this morning with Netanyahu coming over to the United States, and it's clearly pressuring the United States to take action on Iran. And I agree. I think yes, Lebanon will be invaded, but also I do believe the United States at some point in time here, probably shortly, will attack Iran. Not sure what they're going to use as a precursor to do so. Maybe they'll carry out a false flag or something and point a finger. That seems to work pretty good for them most of the time. But,
well, it doesn't really, but that's what they do.
I
mean, it doesn't really because we see through the false flags. But they're going to do it anyway and act like everybody believes them.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, with the reunified North Korea and South Korea getting back together again, which the United States is going to try to sabotage that in some way, you can bet on that. I don't know. I'm expecting some kind of false flag and to sabotage the possibility of both these countries getting together and being one. The U.S. doesn't want that. That's not part of their plan. And we remember General Wesley Clark's 7 countries in 5 years. This is going to be a spoiler for them if they can't kick something off. They got to keep this anger at North Korea. They can't have these two talking. They can't have them holding hands. And they're going to try to sabotage this somehow, some way.
Yeah, they are. They are. They want to keep the two Koreas apart. Partly it's because North Korea represents a failed war for the United States. The war never officially ended, and the U.S. didn't win. And so there's a lot of institutional desire for revenge in the military. Anyway, listen, stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking with Steve Elkins. And believe it or not, they're already starting with the thing with North Korea. Newsweek.com. I'm amazed they're still in business with all the problems they're having. Is North Korea preparing to attack U.S. power plants? And they're out there with this story about how state-backed hackers in North Korea are setting their sights on critical infrastructure in the United States with the aim of knocking out power in the country, cybersecurity researchers have warned. And then they go on down. They're blaming North Korea for everything. They're blaming it for WannaCry. They're blaming it for the outages in Ukraine. And, of course, they always bring in the Sony Pictures hack in 2014. Which was later revealed to have been an internal leak, not a hack. And anybody who understands computer security understands with the state of the net the way it is very easy for the perpetrator of ransomware or hack to conceal their origin. They can hack into a server in North Korea and send their malware through that to lay a false trail. But this story is just complete and utter nonsense. But they're out there pushing this, which suggests that we may be looking at a virtual 911, where whoever has developed this memcached DOS attack is going to direct it against power stations or critical infrastructure, cause massive blackouts and say, oh, North Korea has attacked us, we're off to war. But it's just another false flag. It's as phony as the Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons. It's as phony as the Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. It's as phony as the torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. It's as phony as Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. It's just another war lie. Stevie there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Hey,
Okay.
I just sent you over something from Allison Ware, the history of U.S. relations, U.S.-Israel relations. So check that out. It's kind of long, but some good information you may want to put on the website. And last one I'll leave you with, you were talking about the polar bears. I remember that picture and how pitiful that was. He's going to drown. But also on top of that, the polar bear's blubber is also very buoyant. So he's not going to drown at all. They never talk about that, but the buoyancy of that blubber of a polar bear is very, very high, so they can't drown.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That adipose tissue is buoyant, which is why human beings can swim and the other apes cannot, which suggests that at some point in our distant past, we went through an aquatic phase. Anyway, Steve, thanks an awful lot here, and I'm looking at the history of U.S.-Israel relations. Interestingly enough, I posted the main page of If Americans Knew to the website earlier today. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mr. Mike, I had called in before and kind of said this to you. I think the congressmen and women need to stop taking the AIPAC pledge, and we need to possibly get away to the people that have taken the AIPAC pledge. Get a list out there, and these are the congressmen and women that we should vote for again. That's, in my book, pledging allegiance to another country. You see that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's what they're doing. That's why I'm saying we're under foreign puppet rule. And as long as members of Congress are willing to take Israel's money, then they're going to bang their hands together at everything Netanyahu says and give Israel everything that it wants taken away from the American people. We've got members of Congress who are now saying that we need to limit the First Amendment when it comes to Israel. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than that, what's going on with all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I look at the members of Congress and I keep asking, where's a good asteroid when you really need one?
I totally agree with what you're saying. One of the things, and this is just a thought that I had, because since Benjamin Netanyahu is in D.C., why don't we rally, organize, have signs out there, let them see it, no more AIPAC pledges. We don't want your money.
There are protesters out there. There are protesters out there. The corporate media will not cover them.
Did not know that. And the other thing that I called in about is I didn't know if you've seen this. Congress Lady Penny, her interview with CNN, talking about how it's always the jump beat, the Russian narrative, constantly on the left. I mean, with the media, and how this is probably stirring up other mentally individuals to go out and do these mass shootings. And it's always, if you look, it's always these people that commit the mass shootings. They're always Democrats, and Democrats on SSRIs.
Yes. It is, there's a very obvious pattern there.
Oh, absolutely. And one of my other things, this is just a thought for future references down the road. I love what you do. You do a great job, and I think not only you, but everybody else in the independent media, in the independent media, should jump on each other's platforms. Maybe we can reach a bigger audience that way.
Well, we do need to reach a bigger audience. I know the numbers on my new web server. My readership is definitely climbing. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just all in favor, you're like, maybe Savage come on yours and you go on Savage, and this isn't competition. War.
No, it isn't, but I don't think Michael Savage is going to have me on his program anytime soon.
I mean, that's just a thought, Alex and you and Alex maybe get together, get on one another. I mean, just, we got to hang together.
I used to be on Alex Jones' show as a regular guest, and this is about 8 years. It's 10 years ago. And that's Genesis offered me my first talk radio show. And I stayed with them for a while. And then Alex Jones and I banged heads over the issue of Israel. And it got personal. And that's when I left GCN and came over to Republic Broadcasting, where I don't have to deal with that kind of nonsense. But I admire Alex Jones. I'm grateful for him for getting me started in talk radio. I certainly empathize with his difficulties right now with all the social media platforms and attacks on his advertisers, because we're going through exactly the same thing right now. So we have to work together to deal with this. And again, if you can support Republic Broadcasting, it is really, really serious. We've already seen a lot of other independent media broadcasters have simply collapsed and gone away. And that's what the ultra wealthy want. These are people who are making billions of dollars, and they want to just strangle the last few pennies coming into the independent media so they can go back to lying to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just a thought of mine, jumping onto each other's, because this is, like I said, this is a straight up information war. Pretty soon, I have a feeling, you always say a Soviet-style collapse. I kind of see blood in the streets. I kind of see a civil war coming pretty soon. And that's what they want.
Not.
That is exactly.
I hope not. I mean, I've given up trying to stop World War III. I've obviously failed on that one. I'd still like to avoid a civil war or a bloody revolution in the streets of this country, and I hope I don't blow that one either. But I hear so many people talking about that, and I'm hearing a lot of people talking about how a government gun grab, when they just announced they're going to confiscate all guns, that might start the shooting, and that would be a tragedy.
And you're talking about the world wars. I have to refer you back to Albert Pike and his 3 world wars in his one letter. This is a definite plan, and I mean, they're following it to the T. They really are.
Well, okay, we'll take a look at that. Anyway, Kevin, we're running out of time. I still got callers on the line, so we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. First, I want to offer my condolences to the 36 brave Russian souls who perished in that plane crash in Syria today, and they died trying to make the world a better place. Second, I want to go over to Great Britain and how the BBC offered up a hit piece on Putin, saying that the day Putin so-called murdered his former mate, and they're talking about the double agent that was poisoned in Britain, like the former agent Alexander Litvinenko,
yes,
who was poisoned most likely by the British MI5 or 6 or the Israeli Mossad. Okay, but the question George Galloway asked, and I think it's a very pertinent question: why would Putin do something like that when he's just 16 days away or 10 days away from the election that he's going to win? He's going to win hands down. This is all psychological warfare.
I agree.
Now, okay.
I just agreed with you. Go ahead.
Okay, and the other thing, like I said, it's all psychological warfare. I was watching Best Documentary on the Oscar the other night, and I guessed who was going to win or what was going to win before they even announced it, and I said Icarus because it was done to make the Russians look bad in the so-called doping scandal. I knew it was going to win because it was a hit piece on Russia all over again now. If the guy who supposedly said that the Russian government paid him to dope up all the Russian athletes in order to win, if he wants to know what lies in his future, just look at Alexander Litvinenko and the other gentleman that was former Russian guy that was poisoned in Great Britain. They don't need him anymore. They got their Oscar, they got their hit piece, they're done with him. That's about all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just want to make a comment about Israel and Iran. As far as Israel starting a war, I just don't think they don't have it in them. I don't see the Jews dropping their barbecue tongs and going to war, in Lebanon. They got their butt kicked in 2006. And it looks like they're going to get their butt kicked again if they go in, because that F-16 that got shot down, that isn't a fluke. They've got some good anti-aircraft equipment in there in southern Israel or Syria. You got to have air superiority to move troops across the land, and I just don't see them getting it. And Iran getting into war with that, I don't know. I just don't see the American people getting excited about coming back in a casket with a flag on it. It's just not in the cards, man.
Well,
North Korea.
Obviously, the people who are over there fighting don't want to come home in a box with a flag. But a lot of people joined the military because they literally could not find anything else to do after they came out of school. I don't see the United States giving up the initiative. We know from the leak that General Wesley Clark did that Iran is supposed to be the last country conquered to take control of the Middle East and its oil resources. It's still out there. I hold a different opinion from you. Israel has gone into Lebanon multiple times, and they've never done very well. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it again. Netanyahu is desperate right now for something to distract the Israeli media and his own population from the fact that his cabinet is starting to turn state's evidence against him in the corruption case. Same thing with getting into Syria. Israel is already selling the oil and gas from under the Golan Heights, which is still officially Syrian territory. Israel wants to grab that and annex it and make it part of Israel. They're not going to give up on that one either. And Israel does have a lot of air cover supplied by the U.S. taxpayer. They have a high per capita density of military bases all over that country. It's only about the size of New Jersey, but they've got a lot of hardware and aircraft in there. You ought to just take a view through Google Earth. Now, Google Earth deliberately blurs the images from Israel, but you can still make on out the very obvious military airfields that are there. And the Israel and the U.S. and NATO, they've gone too far down this road of war to turn back now. Well, they can't quit now without the economies imploding. So I'm afraid, we're heading into a world war.
Okay, I'll remember this conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to say two things. One is there's a video on YouTube, and the title is Wayne Paul's Brother to Dr. Ron Paul explains how the Fed was created. Wayne Paul, brother to Dr. Ron Paul, explains how the Fed was created. It's about 2 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of covers it a little bit. And the other thing I thought was odd was the school where the shooting was had the same name as the hospital where they took JFK to. I thought it was weird.
Well, no, that's not accurate. It's basically the town of Parkland. The name of the school was something else, very long name. We call it Parkland for short. And yes, Parkland is a very common name applied to buildings and so forth and so on. And there are Parkland towns and cities in many, many states. There are only so many names that are out there. So I don't see that there's anything necessarily significant in that.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking my call.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great
We're
show.
going to let you go.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Now, a federal judge in San Francisco is hearing from expert witnesses on the science and safety of glyphosate. And the purpose of this hearing, started yesterday, will determine if plaintiffs around the country can move forward with their legal action against Monsanto over cancer claims. And I hope it moves forward, because I, for one, have had enough of this corporate immunity where they can just do whatever they want to do, sell bad products, and nothing happens to them. Article out of Daily Mail in Great Britain. Apparently, oral contraception does increase the risk of a stroke. When you realize that the prime purpose of all life is to make more life, you have to understand that anything that gets in the way of it, there's going to be consequences and side effects. Now, here's a story that is another reminder of why we favor self-care, natural remedies, and so forth. This is over at Brass Check. Apparently, doctors took hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes to basically push a highly profitable drug that killed people. And it's 100 times stronger than morphine. Doctors took hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes to prescribe it. The pharmacy reps were taught to lie to doctors, patients, and insurance companies. Now, Dr. John N. Kapoor of Phoenix, Arizona, the founder and former CEO of Insys and still a member of its board, faces federal charges of racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback law. So they're starting to get these people. We're going to take a break, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Another story, this one out of Russia Today. Apparently, a pediatric cardiologist from Marietta, Georgia, has admitted illegally providing confidential patient data to U.S. pharmaceutical company Aiea. The information was to help the company mismarket a costly drug. Dr. Eduardo Montana pleaded guilty in a Boston court, basically disclosing 280 patients' individually identifiable health information to Aiea. And last September, the company was fined over $35 million to resolve criminal charges linked to the mismarketing of its drug Gextapid. So, again, it's more about money than health here. This is an interesting article. This is MedCrave Online. We are all concerned about vaccine safety, and so far, all of the studies about vaccine safety have been about its physiological reaction, the reaction to the adjuvants, its chemistry. Somebody decided to take a different approach, and they basically did a study where they went on out and they bought a whole bunch of vaccines from well-known companies, and they put them underneath a scanning electron microscope, just one drop of the vaccine, and they discovered vaccines are contaminated with microcontamination and nanocontamination. And these particles they're finding in these vaccines are not part of the ingredients. In fact, they're described as inorganic, non-biodegradable, non-biocombustible. Nobody knows what they're there for, but apparently they are in all the vaccines. And is it a manufacturing flaw? Is there some piece of machinery that's grinding itself up? And so they're continuing to basically look at this and try and isolate some of these nanoparticles and discover what exactly they're made out of. Because that's a little bit scary here. Now, you've probably seen those ads for mail order, or rather online ordering, home delivery meal kits, where you get a package and you open it up and there's all the components you need to make a nice home-cooked dinner. And it looks really easy and very convenient, but there is a problem. Research into this is showing that the supply chain is not always cold secure, and that in point of fact, some of these boxes will arrive at the front door of your home as much as 8 hours at room temperature or even hotter. And that means the bacterial content is going through the roof. So you need to be very, very, very careful with that. Now, getting on back to the let's blame Russia for everything, Congress is now blaming Russians for the anti-fracking sentiment. Next, they're going to blame Russia for the anti-vaccine sentiment. I mean, it's really ridiculous. It's out of hand. An asteroid's going to pass by the Earth tomorrow. It's probably all Russia's fault. It's got to be all Russia's fault here. It really is very, very silly. And I'm hoping that most Americans are able to realize that this is just war propaganda. It's way over the top. And no, Russia did not steal and strip our old Honda. That was a joke. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to share with you, I am certain. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. We are literally in a war with the corporate media and the corporate social media to keep the truth getting out to the American people before we wind up with mushroom clouds out our side window. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.